Welcome in, everyone. Before we even dive into the material today, I just want to offer a really heartfelt, divine blessing over your day and your entire week ahead. May you find some solid grounding and peace today.
That is a really wonderful way to start. And honestly, we are going to need some grounding for what we're looking at today.
Oh, absolutely, because today's deep dive is, well, it's into one of the most chaotic stories in all of ancient literature. We're unpacking Judges chapter 17.
Right, which is just a wild text.
It really is. Imagine stealing an absolute fortune from your own mother, only to hear her pronounce this blood-curdling, formal religious curse on the unknown thief. You panic, you confess.
And instead of punishing you, she immediately tries to reverse that curse by building a totally illegal idol right in your living room.
Exactly. It makes zero logical sense to a modern reader. So our mission today is to decode this bizarre story about stolen silver, rogue priests, and DIY religion. We're going to be leaning heavily on the Holman and NAPA study Bible commentaries to really understand what happens when a society fundamentally loses its grip on objective truth.
Yeah, it's a masterclass in psychological and societal collapse, honestly. The author of Judges, he doesn't just tell us that society was failing. He actually gives us a front row seat to the dysfunction.
Right at the kitchen table.
Exactly. And to understand why this family is acting so erratically, we have to grasp the defining ethos of their era. The book of Judges concludes with this really haunting refrain, which is, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes."
Which, I think to us sounds a bit like modern hyper-individualism, right? Like you do you.
Yeah.
But in the context of the ancient Near East, doing what is right in your own eyes isn't just about personal freedom. It implies a complete breakdown of a shared moral reality.
Yes, exactly. The commentaries are very careful to distinguish this specific era because earlier in the book of Judges, the crisis was usually external.
Like foreign armies invading and that sort of thing.
Right, physical oppression.
No.
But by chapter 17, the rot is entirely internal. The infrastructure of their faith and their legal system has just evaporated. So people aren't necessarily abandoning the idea of God, but they're entirely redefining his rules based on whatever feels convenient or, advantageous in the moment.
And if you want to see how that macro-level societal decay actually plays out in real life, you don't look at the politicians. You look at the family unit. So the text zooms in on this guy named Micah.
Living in the hill country of Ephraim.
Right. And Micah kicks off our story by stealing 1,100 pieces of silver from his mother. And just to help you visualize this, silver back then was weighed in shekels. So this isn't pocket change. It's something like 28 pounds of silver. This is generational wealth we're talking about.
It's a staggering amount. Just for context, later in this very same story, we'll see 10 pieces of silver offered as a livable annual salary. So 1,100 pieces is the equivalent of millions of dollars today.
Wow.
Yeah, it requires serious premeditation to steal and hide that much metal. And when his mother realizes her fortune is gone, her reaction sets off this crazy chain of spiritual dominoes. She doesn't just call the ancient equivalent of the police. She pronounces a severe, formal curse on the thief.
And I want to pause on that curse for a second because to a modern reader, a curse just sounds like, throwing a tantrum or yelling insults. But in the ancient Near Eastern worldview, spoken words, especially formal blessings and curses, weren't just invisible sounds. They were viewed almost like physical forces, right?
That is a really crucial distinction. Anthropologists often refer to this as speech act theory in the ancient mind. A curse wasn't a wish, it was a deployment.
Like launching a weapon.
Exactly like that. They believed that by invoking the divine to curse someone, you were releasing this tangible, destructive spiritual energy into the world that would inevitably hunt down its target. It carried real, terrifying weight.
Which completely explains Micah's reaction then. I mean, he isn't suddenly struck by a guilty conscience over the theft itself. He's terrified that the spiritual missile his mother just launched is going to hit him.
So he immediately goes to her and confesses. He says, "I have the silver. I took it."
And here is where the moral compass of this family is revealed to be just completely shattered. Because in a functioning society guided by the orthodox law of Moses, a confession of theft triggers a very specific legal mechanism.
Right, like restitution and sacrifices.
Yes. There are protocols for restitution, going to the centralized tabernacle, offering a trespass offering, and for the community to actually enforce discipline. But the mother completely bypasses all of that. She panics because the curse she launched is now heading straight for her son, so she has to deploy a countermeasure. She immediately responds to his confession of grand larceny by saying, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." She tries to neutralize the terse with an equal and opposite blessing.
Precisely, and notice the name she uses there. She invokes Yahweh, the sacred covenant name of God. She is attempting to manipulate the true God to clean up the mess of her own dysfunctional family dynamics.
It's like she views God as a software program. If she just inputs the right password, his sacred name, she can bypass the security protocols of actual justice and morality. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card, but she fundamentally misunderstands the rules of the game.
That's a great way to put it.
And her next move is even more chaotic. She declares that she is dedicating this recovered silver to the Lord. But she doesn't give it to the actual tabernacle. She takes 200 pieces of it to a silversmith to cast a carved idol. Isn't it fascinating and entirely contradictory that they invoke the name of Yahweh to bless the silver, but then immediately break the Ten Commandments by using it to cast an idol?
It really is. And this is the textbook definition of syncretism, which the NAA commentary highlights heavily. Syncretism is the blending of incompatible belief systems.
Okay, right.
So she is maintaining the vocabulary of her traditional faith dedicating things to Yahweh, but she's executing it through entirely pagan mechanisms.
It's like a corrupt corporation setting up a shell company. They are using the official trusted letterhead of Yahweh, but the actual business they are conducting, making a graven image, explicitly violates the second of the Ten Commandments. They're breaking the core rules of their faith while smiling and claiming they are being deeply religious. It's like they treat God as a magic spell rather than a moral authority.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. And there's an incredibly cynical detail in the math here, too. She originally claimed she was dedicating the entire 1,100 pieces of silver to the Lord. But she only gives the silversmith 200 pieces.
Oh, wow. So she kept 900 pieces for herself.
Exactly. Even in her attempt to appease the divine, she's cutting corners and holding back roughly 80% of the dedication. It just shows how deeply superficial their devotion has become. They want the psychological comfort of religion without any of the actual cost or obedience.
So Micah now has this shiny, expensive silver idol. And since he obviously can't take a highly illegal graven image to Shiloh, which was the official centralized location for Israel's worship at the time, he is forced to create his own infrastructure. He builds a personal shrine in his house, which the text calls a house of gods.
And the creation of this private shrine is a direct violation of Deuteronomy 12, which explicitly commanded the Israelites to worship together at a single, centralized sanctuary.
Right, because centralization wasn't just about geography, was it?
No, not at all. It was meant to prevent exactly this kind of rogue, localized corruption. When you worship in a community, there is accountability. When you build a shrine in your living room, you are the supreme authority.
Right. He gets to be the CEO of his own religion. It's like buffet-style spirituality or a rogue religious franchise.
Good.
Micah isn't just making a mistake here. He's building a customized religion in his living room where he gets to pick and choose the aesthetic of faith without any of the actual requirements.
He absolutely is. And to furnish this rogue operation, the text says he manufactures an ephod and teraphim.
Now, an ephod, just to remind everyone listening, is supposed to be the incredibly sacred jeweled garment worn exclusively by the legitimate high priest, right?
Yeah.
It was used for discerning God's will.
Yes. The high priest's ephod contained the Urim and Thummim, which were tools used to receive direct answers from God during national crises. By making his own ephod, Micah is essentially trying to pirate that direct line to the divine. He doesn't want to travel to Shiloh and submit to the high priest. He wants God on speed dial in his own house.
That is wild.
And the Holman commentary points out that this perfectly mirrors an earlier tragedy in Judges, where Gideon made a gold ephod that eventually became a snare of idolatry for the whole nation.
And what about the teraphim?
Well, teraphim were household gods, usually small figurines. In the ancient Near East, they often functioned almost like physical title deeds to a family's estate, but they were also heavily associated with fortune-telling and divination.
So Micah is fully stocking his spiritual buffet. He's got the stolen silver Yahweh idol, the counterfeit high priest uniform, and the pagan fortune-telling figurines.
Exactly. But a shrine is useless without personnel, you know? You need someone to actually operate the machinery of this DIY religion. So Micah simply ordains his own son to be the priest.
But there's a glaring problem there. I mean, even in his delusion, Micah must realize this is hollow. You can slap a title on your son, but that doesn't magically give him spiritual authority.
No, it doesn't. And Micah is suffering from the insecurity of the counterfeit here. He has built this impressive aesthetic of faith, but deep down, he knows it lacks any real legitimacy. He wants the convenience of his homemade religion, But he desperately craves the institutional validation of the real thing.
Which makes him the perfect mark for a drifter. Because right at this moment of insecurity, a young man wanders into the hill country of Ephraim. The text tells us he is a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and he is just traveling around looking for a convenient place to stay.
And the arrival of this specific traveler is the linchpin of the whole story. It takes the corruption from a private family matter and connects it to the systemic failure of the entire nation.
Wait, let's look at this logically for a second. Aren't Levites supposed to have designated towns and duties, like a religious civil servant? Why is this guy backpacking looking for convenience or comfort? Shouldn't he be at his assigned post?
You've hit on the exact symptom of the national collapse. According to the book of Joshua, the tribe of Levi was not given a contiguous piece of land like the other tribes. Instead, they were distributed across specific Levitical cities throughout Israel. Their job was to teach the law, mediate disputes, and guide the spiritual life of the community. They were supposed to be supported by the tithes of the other tribes.
So if he is wandering, it means the system has entirely broken down.
Completely. The fact that this Levite has left his post in Bethlehem and is looking for a place to stay implies that the Israelites have just stopped paying their tithes. The people have abandoned God, which means they've abandoned the Levites. The spiritual economy is bankrupt.
Wow.
So this Levite is forced to become a religious mercenary, wandering the country looking for whoever will feed him.
And he stumbles right into Micah's house. Micah, who is desperate for legitimacy, sees this wandering Levite and basically offers him a job on the spot. He says, "Stay with me and be a father and a priest to me." And he offers him, what, 10 pieces of silver a year, plus a suit of clothes and room and board. Which, by the way, 10 pieces of silver seems like a terrible salary compared to the 1,100 pieces Micah originally stole.
It is the ultimate commodification of the sacred. But the commentaries point out several glaring issues with this hire beyond just the low pay. First, the text repeatedly emphasizes that the Levite is a young man. According to the book of Numbers, a man had to be at least 30 years old to enter the official priestly service.
So he's unqualified by age right out of the gate.
Yes. And far more importantly, while he is a Levite, he is almost certainly not from the family of Aaron. In Israel's law, all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests. Only the direct descendants of Aaron had the authority to serve as priests and offer sacrifices. Other Levites were basically assistants.
It's like a tech startup hiring a guy just because he's wearing a Harvard sweatshirt. Entirely dissatisfied, nervous board of investors. Micah doesn't care about the actual credentials or the law. He just wants the brand recognition of the word Levite to legitimize his illegal setup.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. And Micah's manipulation is actually quite sophisticated. He offers the young man the title of father, which was an honorary term of deep respect for his spiritual authority. He strokes the young man's ego.
But the text gives us that brilliant, ironic detail. It says the Levite became like one of his sons. So Micah calls him father to his face to feel legitimate, but treats him as a subordinate, like a son, so he can maintain absolute control.
It's entirely transactional.
Right. Micah isn't submitting to a spiritual authority. He is buying an employee to manage his spiritual assets.
And the Levite sells out his sacred calling for basic comfort. As you mentioned, 10 pieces of silver is an insultingly low wage, but the Levite is so spiritually hollowed out that he accepts it. He agrees to preside over an idol made of stolen money, just so he can have a steady meal.
Which brings us to the psychological climax of this entire dark saga. Once the Levite puts on the uniform and moves into the living room shrine, Micah experiences this profound, terrifying delusion of security.
It is perhaps the most chilling verse in the entire chapter because it captures the exact moment a human being completely deceives themselves.
Micah stands back, looks at his rogue priest and his stolen silver idol, and proudly declares, "Now I know that the Lord will do me good because I have a Levite as priest." He thinks he has God in his pocket now.
It's like buying a lucky rabbit's foot.
Yes, exactly.
But how does someone get to the point where they believe they can put a legitimate label, the Levite, on an illegitimate setup, the idols, and expect God to endorse it?
Well, commentators emphasize that this is the ultimate perversion of the sanctuary. Micah has domesticated the divine. He genuinely believes that God is bound by a technicality. Because Micah acquired the correct religious biological Levite, he assumes the vending machine of heaven is now obligated to dispense prosperity.
He thinks he's bought the franchise rights to God's blessing. He really does, and it happens when you divorce religion from relationship and morality and turn it into a formula for control. Micah doesn't want a God who challenges him or a God who demands repentance for his theft. He wants a God who works for him. The Levite essentially becomes just another idol in the room, a tool to guarantee Micah's success.
And the tragedy, as the commentators point out, is that this delusion sets the stage for the severe moral tragedies that follow in the later chapters of Judges. If you can convince yourself that you can manipulate God to endorse your selfishness, you can justify absolutely any behavior.
Precisely. When society lacks strong, righteous leadership, people will bend the sacred to serve their own selfish desires. You end up with a culture of people who are incredibly spiritual, but entirely corrupt.
That's a heavy but deeply necessary insight. Let's pull all these threads together for a quick summary. We started with a staggering theft of 28 pounds of silver at a kitchen table. We saw a mother try to intercept a spiritual curse by using God's name to build a pagan idol, essentially hacking her own religion with that contradictory blessing.
Then we watched Micah leverage that idol to build a private, unauthorized shrine, complete with counterfeit garments and fortune-telling statues, completely isolating himself from the accountability of the wider community.
He became the supreme authority of his own reality. And finally, the system's collapse delivered a wandering, compromised Levite right to his door, a man who traded his sacred calling for a comfortable room and 10 pieces of silver.
Which allowed Micah to purchase the illusion of legitimacy, confidently declaring that God was now on his payroll.
This story perfectly encapsulates the mechanics of a society where everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
It is a profound historical case study on the dangers of spiritual compromise.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you, our listener, to mull over as you go about your week. In our modern era, we might not be casting silver idols in our living rooms, but we are absolutely obsessed with customization. We ruthlessly curate our newsfeed so we only hear opinions that validate us. We customize our diets, our entertainment, our entire digital existence to avoid friction.
That is so true.
But when we apply that same instinct to truth and morality, when we start trying to customize our convictions to fit what is comfortable and convenient, just like Micah and the wandering Levite did with their localized shrine, we have to ask ourselves a really hard question. Are we actually worshiping the truth, or have we just found a highly sophisticated way to worship a reflection of ourselves?
That is exactly the mirror this ancient text holds up to us.
It's something that will definitely stick with me. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack this fascinating and chaotic piece of history. I am officially saying goodbye for now and declaring that God blesses all the listeners. Take care of yourselves, keep asking those hard questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.